Thank you for that great introduction. I could have written that myself.
You did, didn't you?
I was just notified 3 days ago that the club needed a presentation, and my first thought was to get someone else, and no one else was immediately available. So I thought, this is a great opportunity to put together a bird program, and this is my first bird program. I've done perhaps a dozen of programs on insects and butterflies and the like, and ecology. But this is my debut presentation of birds, and I've been photographing birds for 20 years. And this is a compilation of some of the best shots, and these are all going to be shots from Sun City Center. So people always ask about my camera, and so here it is. And it surprises a lot of people that it's so modest. It's not cheap, but it's modest in terms of bird photography. I'm sure you've seen those big, huge lenses and tripods and everything. Everything I shoot is handheld. And unlike most nature photographers, I always use flash. And this flash is, a Nikon flash is powerful enough to illuminate the birds. So let's get started. Everyone knows these birds, the white ibis, and they're taking a bath at the end of the day. So which boids do we see in our communities? We have full-time residents, and we have seasonal residents. Some come for the winter, and some come for the summer. Now, those are in quotes because it's not, they don't go by the calendar summer. Hey, it's summer, I'm going to go there. They show up over a period of time, and they're just divided loosely into these categories. We have migrants passing through, and we have day visitors and flyovers, and we have some strays and rarities, which we're going to look at right now. So one of our most stunning residents here is a wood duck, and this is a male. And this was photographed on the Sun City Center nature trails, which our club tends to. And this is the male with the female. And notice that she's not so brightly colored, but she's still a very colorful bird. They are very skittish, so if you want to see them on the nature trail, you have to be quiet, no dogs, and be very careful when you go in. There are also sometimes some on the window in the woods trail over there. Oh, all together now. Oh, yeah. So these are black-bellied whistling ducks, probably our most common bird here, our most common duck, at least here in Sun City Center. And they have huge broods, and we have to do something to control those. We're going to find out how that works. So everybody knows this bird, roseate spoonbill. And it's called the spoonbill for an obvious reason. The bill is shaped like a spoon. But it's interesting the way they feed, because they move the bill from side to side. They don't use it like a spoon, but it's going side by side. And inside of their bill are little sensors that sense when food is passing through, and the bill immediately clamps shut. And then the excess water is excreted through little filter mechanisms on the side of the bill. And I don't have a shot of that, but I did get a good close-up shot of a flamingo in one of the flamingo gardens where people raise them in these, outdoor pens and things. So I was able to get a close shot, and if you look closely, you can see the zipper-like thing on the side of the bill. That's like a sieve that squirts the water out. And so this is a case where I was lucky enough to get actually 2 great blue herons there. One is upside down, but they were walking together. This is a red-shouldered hawk, and oddly enough, in this picture you can actually see the red shoulder. That's how it got its name. And notice the orange feet. You can learn a lot about a bird by looking at its feet, and also its bill, raptorial bill, used for shredding apart cutting through fur and skin and bone even. So what do red-shouldered hawks do in their free time? They hang out. Yeah, it's going to get worse. So here's that bill that we were speaking about ripping through not only can it rip through the skin and fur, but it's also can be a dainty eater. It has a lot of control in that bill. And I tried to get a lot of unusual shots in our community. This is a fish crow taken early in the morning and the lights are still on. So I cultivate shots like that. And this is a great horned owl that we were just talking about. And this was taken just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago on one of Jan and Steve's morning walks, their Tuesday morning walks there in Kings Point. And as Ray mentioned, they're going to be nesting soon, raising their babies. This was also taken on one of their walks just 2 weeks ago. And this is, of course, a pileated woodpecker, and it's working on a telephone pole, one of their favorite activities. And that's why they have concrete poles now. And so you're going to see a lot of pileates. I predict this. You heard it here, that you're going to see a lot of pileated woodpeckers with very dull bills. Oh, gee. Now, the other group of birds that we have here is our songbirds. So everybody knows this is a red cardinal, and what's going on here? Well, this was at Cockroach Bay, and we were arriving there for a walk, and this bird was doing this. And what is it doing? Well, all birds, or most birds anyway, are territorial. The males especially are territorial, and they try to get rid of their competitors. So this bird is looking in the mirror and seeing an enemy, even though it might look very familiar. He has no way of knowing that. So he was pecking at the mirror and everything. So this inspired me to write a poem. You want a piece of me? You look so handsome, you could be my twin. You came here to fight, you ain't gonna win. I'll peck and I'll kick and finish you quick, 'cause courting my mate is the cardinal sin. And then this happened. He tried to kill him. He says, no matter what I give him, he comes back with more. Okay, the other group that we have here is our winter visitors, and that includes their two most common warblers, which is the yellow rump. And they're very drab, and we see them here. But if you go up to McGee Marsh, which Jan and Steve and I took a trip up there last March, this is what it looks like in breeding plumage. Whoa. Big change. And that's how this male picks up the babes. He looks really sharp. And you won't recognize the palm warbler either. That's a palm warbler in breeding plumage. Very different from what we're seeing in our yards right now. Okay, in the summer we have these come to visit, and this is our swallowtail kite. And what is it doing there? It's going after that insect, which turns out to be a drone bee, a male honeybee. And what happened was my wife Jane and I were doing a butterfly count, 4th of July butterfly count for the North American Butterfly Association. We were out at Colt Creek State Park, and we noticed a flock of these swallowtail kites feeding up way up high over our heads. And so I was able to get these shots. And it turns out that the drone bees congregate up there, and they wait for a virgin female honeybee to fly up and mate with her. and it doesn't end well for them, the penis actually explodes and they fall to the ground dead. And if you want to see more about this, you have to come to my next presentation, which is going to be Let's Do It in the Garden. Okay, so did swallowtail kite get the bee? Yes, he did. Whoa. Does he have to worry about being stung? Well, males don't sting, so no. If it's a virgin queen, yes, she can sting. But look at those talons, those claws, they're really well protected. So male or female, he's going to gobble it down. And yes, this is a very good photograph. So let's talk about migration. We are on a migration hotspot, especially at Fort DeSoto. That's really the crosshairs for a lot of pats. We get a lot of the peripheral action. So if I could have given you a lot of shots of warblers and things that were all taken at Fort DeSoto, but I'm trying to limit this program just to shots that were taken here in our community. But Fort DeSoto is, of course, the magnet for birders across the nation who actually come here. It's one of the famous hot spots. So these are who show up, and we do have scarlet tanagers come to Sun City Center. I have pictures of them on the nature trail. This was taken at Fort DeSoto because it's much better than anything I've shot around here, but that's a male eating a mulberry. On the trail itself, at the beginning, we have laurel cherry trees, and they have these berries on them, and this is the cedar waxwing coming through. They always come through in flocks. So most of our migrant warblers are in the genus Setophaga, which translates to moth eater. So the moths are just starting to emerge. They're laying eggs and all, just as the warblers come through. So it's perfect timing. The migration just coincides with that. So that's what they eat. And by the way, that was a blackpoll warbler, and it's famous for its 72-hour nonstop migratory flight. So what they do is they look under the leaves for spots where moths always bend their abdomens around and lay eggs on the underside of leaves. So that's why you see these birds always in these impossible poses looking for under the leaves to glean. This happens to be Isle moth eggs. They turn into caterpillars, and the disguises that they have don't help them when you have a lot of hungry warblers out there looking for them. And of course, they eat the moths also. And these are two moths that we have on the Sun City Center Nature Trail. And these are moths, caterpillars that practically nobody likes except people like me. They say, hey, just leave these alone. These are what feed our bird babies. This is a warbler nest, can go through a group of caterpillars like that in short order. In Sun City Center, we have a garden called the Tillers and Toilers, and I have a plot there. And I raise Seminole pumpkins. And it's always attacked by a moth called the melon moth, and it lays its eggs. And the caterpillars are nice and green and juicy like this. And I do not spray. I do not recommend sprays of any kind when you're out in these areas, because if you do that, you're literally killing birds. And this is a northern parula that was hanging out of my garden. And I have many photographs of like this, of it catching the caterpillars and I never could find the nest, but I'd like to think that I helped raise a family of northern parulas. So someday visitors breed and roost elsewhere, visit our community, and of course, if you want to see laughing gulls, where do you go? You go to the Walmart parking lot, right? Out at Fort DeSoto, you can see a lot of black skimmers like this, and a couple came to Sun City Center for a few years, and they would come in the evening. and they would skim the water. So that's why they're called skimmers. Usually the names make sense. They're skimming along. They have a bill that the lower bill is in the water, you can see that, and the upper bill is ready to clamp down. They should connect with the fish.
How big are those?
They are good-sized birds. They're, good question. They are, well, you get a sense of it by the foliage here. So you can see that this is, in this bird, the bill has just clamped down. This was taken on the north course, and one of the great sadnesses for all of us birders is that these golf courses are now closed to us. Here's another shot taken, you can tell it's getting towards sundown, and that's why flash is so important. Here's another shot. Another case where another bird is flying upside down under it. And this is maybe my best shot of all. So we mentioned rarities. Well, we have not had any recorded rarities here in Sun City Center. But this is a fork-tailed flycatcher, and it showed up in Ruskin down at the Bahia Beach Preserve, which is a great destination for, if you haven't been there, it's an easy in and out walk, and there's a lot of birds to see there. And does the fly show up? There's a little white streak just about that far in front of the bird's mouth, and it was catching a fly. This was on the north course, which is now closed. This is, everybody knows what this is? Red-headed, not a red-bellied. This is the real thing. This is the red-headed woodpecker. Another bird that shows up, an Ande parakeet. There's a lot of these at Fort DeSoto, but yes, it's feeding upside down on this date palm. And Larry, Curly, and Moe showed up. So what do our residents do? They socialize like this pair of bluebirds, and those are all rock pigeons, or rock doves, I think they call them now. But notice that they all look different, but that's all the same species. So they hang out together. So here's an odd encounter. And one can sense that it's not going to end well. But we'll find out. But this picture invites a caption, and I can picture that red-shouldered hawk saying to the blue-gray gnatcatcher, you know, should I even bother? It's such a small bird. But fortunately for the bird, he flew off. And other birds aren't so lucky. Oh, they have to eat. Okay, what do our residents do? They eat. And this is a limpkin eating an invasive Asian clam that showed up here in the 1930s. They were brought here by Asian immigrants. And of course, they've taken over there an enormous problem, especially in northern waterways. They clog sieves and have problems for dams and power plants. But the limpkins just, I mean, can you imagine opening a clam with two sticks, like chopsticks? I mean, that's the equivalent of what's going on here. It's amazing how these birds do it. And in fact, the next shot is of a ring-billed duck who was so impressed by this, he tried it himself. I don't think that one turned out well either. Okay, the birds eat and eat and eat. Tilapia, everyone knows the great blue heron, and that's a swamp eel. And how many people have seen a swamp eel? Yeah, well, that's great. That's great, because they show up when we have heavy rains. A lot of areas get flooded that aren't usually flooded, and these swamp eels miraculously show up. And this was taken about 30 feet from my Tillers and Toilers garden plot. There's a swale there that floods, and suddenly swamp eels showed up, and so did a little blue heron. There's one. Whoa! What fun to eat. On this shot, by the way, this is worth mentioning, you can see that if you look closely, you can see that the eye has a nictitating membrane over it to protect it. And I was surprised to see that in this time the eye is actually open. And here's a little blue heron. Do you wonder about this also? I mean, is it really going to swallow that turtle, shell and all? I don't think so, but it flew off before I could find out. These are anhingas, and they always swallow a fish head first. Those pectoral spines there are going to stick in the throat the wrong way for sure if they try tail first. Maybe you've wondered why we don't see so many frogs around here. This is why. They quickly disappear. And if you go out to the same spot, even if it's your backyard, you start to get to know your birds. You can tell them apart. This is a mockingbird that showed up for about 2 months, I guess, on the Sun City Center Nature Trail, and I got to recognize it because it's missing half of its lower bill there. You can see that it's chunked off there. And we don't think about tufted titmice as being, I guess, adept, but they're able to pull out the seeds from pine cones, and that's what it's eating here. So we're going to look at a bird that is what we call a generalist. Woodpeckers eat practically everything. We usually think of them as they peck in the wood, they find an insect and they eat it. But it's much more than that. They're scavengers sometimes, and they eat practically everything, and I'm documenting as many different things as I can here. We have acorn. This is a moth pupa, and it's feeding its baby inside the nest. This is a Polistes wasp, which, yes, does sting. And this is a brown lacewing, which is loved by gardeners because they eat so many aphids. And can you guess what this is?
Lunch.
Lunch, yes. That is the egg of an animal. You know, the little gecko things that run around. In fact, there was a baby about to hatch inside. Oh, you can see it there. And of course, this delights my wife Jane no end. Yay! They're a real pest in our house. And of course, they eat the adults too. So that is why, you know, when you see a bird that's doing very well and so successful, there's usually a reason for it. And if you're a generalist feeder, if you're an omnivore, you're going to have a much better chance of surviving than if you're a specialist. So let's look at this osprey who's examining his toes, and we're going to examine his toes. Do you notice anything? A closer look will help. All right, so what's odd about this? But you notice that the bottom pair of talons there, they see 8 talons there, right? So there's 2 pairs of talons. You notice that 2 are arranged 2 by 2, and I have it labeled for you. I'll just show you that now. So the bottom pair is 2 and 2, and that's how it wraps around the branch. And the other pair has one, that odd one sticking straight up there. It can rotate that in any direction. So sometimes they have the foot arranged for 3 in front and 1 in back. That's what it uses for walking. And then in that, it's called an isodactyl. And when there are 2 and 2, it's zygodactyl. Those are $20 words, I know. But those are common botanical terms also, zyga and anus. And so that arrangement helps them They can grab things with it very easily. They can catch prey with it. And then when they have a fish on a perch like this, they have to hold it down. So they hold it down, not with their talons, we'll look at it, but on the bottom of their foot, they have special scales, which are called spicules, which actually have little barbs in them that keeps that fish from slipping. But notice what's happened to the talons. They can actually rotate them. So the talons are not grasping, they're all flayed out like that. Bird feet are amazing, and there are bird feet specialists.
Is that how they walk?
They walk, like I said, let's look at this one again. The anisodactyl form, which you see on top there, which is 3 toes in front and 1 in back. That's how they walk. You think of a chicken or something like that. Most birds have that foot arrangement, 3 toes in front, 1 in back, and those are walking birds. For perching, it's much better to have 2 in front and 2 in back, which is why we see the right legs there. This is the oddball. It can go either backwards or forwards. So it shares this characteristics with owls. And so we were talking about eagles earlier. This is a bald eagle in my backyard. My eagle-eyed wife Jane spotted it. I grabbed my camera, which is always at the ready, and this was in the newsletter, so you've seen it before. But notice how it's grabbed the head of the duck there. This is the whistling duck. So we're not going to really miss it, but it's a great meal for that eagle. And there's always leftovers. That's the leg of an egret, and you can see it better from here. So what happens to all these leftovers? Well, we have nature's cleanup crew. We have the vultures. So which is the younger vulture here? Is it this one or is it this one? The one, how do we know that?
It's got hair on its head.
It's got hair on its head. As a vulture ages, it loses its hair. Wow, I could be a vulture. You too, John. Yeah, so the reason for that is they stick their head into gooey, yucky stuff like this dead opossum, and that, if it were hairy, it'd all get matted, so it quickly loses its head. So it looks disgusting. In fact, it's so disgusting that I wrote a poem about it. Happy entrails to you. Dining on roadkill won't kill ya. A possum is bound to fulfill ya. We birds of a feather, we carry on together. So pass me an eyeball, please, will ya? Geez, all this in 2 days. Wow, what could I have done with a whole week?
Kind of scary.
That's scary. Okay, so what do our residents do? They court and mate. And the first thing you do when you're courting is you want to get dressed up. Oh, wow. What is this bird?
Cattle egret.
Yes, Betty, good for you. You were the first to say so. You had an extra jelly donut. That's great. Yeah, this is a cattle egret, and we think of them as being just, pedestrian birds. They're just sort of blah, white. But when they get into breeding plumage, this guy really wants to pick up the babes. So then they posture, they do these back and forth movements like these great blue herons, which you can hardly recognize. And hingas doing the neck thing. And then eventually they mate. This was also taken on a Jan and Steve walk from a couple years ago. These are American kestrels. And then some seasonal residents breed a nest here like this parula, but if you look at the nest, you're going to see the babies, but it's very hard to find them. So this is on our tillers and toilers garden. This is a great crested flycatcher getting nesting material together. And this was taken at Mary Duncan, where are you? Yay, Mary. Mary had, when she lived over on Pebble Beach there, she had purple martin houses, and so I was happy to have her invite me over to shoot the birds, and this is one of them flying into her nest. So other seasonal residents hang out here but breed another time and place, like the eastern phoebe and the kingfisher. There's a long list of those. Like the gray catbird, this is on the Sun City Center Nature Trail. That's eating winged sumac berries, one of their favorites. And then they build nests, and this is a mourning dove, and they nest in the most god-awful places, like doorposts on top of, this is a water softener. And it hardly looks like a mourning dove. Dre, I gotta talk to you afterwards about this. It hardly looks like a mourning dove, but that's what it is. And then the babies come. Shall we all say, "Aww"? Yeah. And they always have their mouths open. They want food and more food. So how does the food get in there? Well, the mama has to feed them. And then a few years ago, I saw this. And I guarantee that all of you saw this. So how many of you went out there to try to get a good photograph of it? Nobody but me. So what has to happen here, what I knew what has to happen, sorry about this, what has to happen is that the light has to turn yellow. There has to be a parent feeding the birds. All right, then you've got a good shot. The problem is that that's a long light. 3 minutes, the light stays yellow for 3 seconds. So in an hour, you have maybe a total of 60 seconds that you can shoot if the parent is there. So it took me several trips in the wee hours of the morning, because you have to shoot so that it's dark enough outside that the orange light lights up enough for contrast. So I shot this, I think at 6:30, this next shot. But that's what it took to get that shot.
Grackles?
Yeah, that's a grackle, common grackle. And then the babies grow. Should we all say, "Aww," again? Okay. And they grow, and they grow, and they have to be fed somehow. So this, like I said, these are Sun City Center shots. There are rookeries in several areas of our community, and this was shot with the permission of someone giving me access through their backyard. And this is, of course, a white ibis. And can you all see what's in her mouth? No, that's a bolus. The food is formed into a ball, and she passes it to the young, who, by having the young stick his bill up inside of her mouth. So it's actually extracting that bolus from her. So that's one method, and little blue herons do it a little differently. She passes it downwards to the chick. And then sometimes there's a feeding frenzy. These are anhingas. Oh my. One with the head in the mouth of the parent, and we have two waiting in line, getting all squished and matted together there. It's a feeding frenzy. And look at this. Pretty remarkable. Poor parent. This poor thing can't get his bill and it's getting squashed. So how do we protect these rookeries here in Sun City Center? Well, by being an ethical birder, respect other people's property, shoot from a distance. These were all shot from a position where I was not in any way impacting these birds. And they're used to human activity anyway. This is not out in the wild. This is people in their backyards, mowers going. But in any case, you want to always respect the birds. And the other thing we need to do is to protect our alligators. Why do we need to do that? By the way, when I saw those other shots, when I saw that rookery, the first thing I said was, "Where's the alligator?" Because if there's no alligator, birds would be gone. After a few were eaten, they would all just fly. So the alligator had to be there, and this was it. And then why do we need to keep the alligators? Because they eat this guy, the raccoon. So what happens? The raccoon sees those birds out there, he tries to swim across. Suddenly he's lunch for the gator. So ospreys are more civilized diners than what we just saw. The adult picks the food off the carcass and then passes it in little morsels, bite-sized morsels to her babies. And they develop much more slowly than sandhill cranes because the sandhill cranes are down on the ground. They grow up very quickly, and those babies go wandering around. Almost as soon as they're born, they're out there with their parents foraging for food. So large birds often need to learn to fly. They stretch and flap their wings in place, and they practice by hopping from branch to branch. And so here we see one testing his wings. This is a young osprey. And then I watched an adult and the juvenile practicing their landings, take off as landings. This was out on the Sun City Center Nature Trail. So this is not the end. This is a new beginning when we see those birds. And this is the end of the program. Thank you.